I've been playing a lot of Avowed over the past month, and there are several things which the game does really well, and I'd love to see other developers incorporate these elements into their own projects. Specifically, I'd love to see a lot of this stuff in the next Elder Scrolls title. We've got approximately 500 more years before Elder Scrolls 6 is out, so there's plenty of time for the devs to play for Avowed and pinch some of the good ideas. And these are the ideas I think should be pinched. First up are companions. Now you might be thinking, hey Sarge, Skyrim already has the Companions Guild. That's specifically a Skyrim thing. But here's my controversial opinion, the Companions Guild kind of sucks. Sure, the whole werewolf side of things is cool, and you definitely want a martial combat faction in your game, but so many of the members are incompetent or annoying that I just don't like them. No, what I'm talking about are followers, or as they're known in Avowed, companions. The Elder Scrolls games do have followers already in them, but the approach on this between the games is vastly different. It's really a quantity versus quality problem. Skyrim has almost 60 followers in the base game and DLC combined, and for the most part, they're incredibly basic. With only a couple of exceptions, they have little to no personality, no real customizability, and are pretty much just bodies to throw into a fight for a small amount of support. Avowed, on the other hand, has 4 followers, who are all fully written characters with specific roles and personalities. And in my opinion, this is the better way to do it. Skyrim did not need 5 dozen different characters who could follow you around. I'd much rather see the next entry in that series have a quarter of the number of followers, but have them be more fleshed out, and Avowed provides a perfect template for that. Each of the 4 main followers in Avowed has a distinct personality and intriguing background, which comes through in every single interaction. Not only do you get the chance to chat with your followers to learn more about them, but they also chime in during quests, giving their opinions or advice. This is great for getting a good feel of a character, and making them more than just a combat drone. But even when it comes to combat, Avowed still does that better. Each of the characters fits into a specific combat role, such as tank or healer, but beyond that they have their own skill trees. Now I absolutely adore follower skill trees, so I'm always going to be in favour of them. They let you customise the way your followers can assist you, and stop them from falling behind in terms of strength when you level up your own character. Plus, a lot of the abilities that you can then use with followers in Avowed are just cool. Second thing that Bethesda should pinch are some of the advanced combat mechanics. I'm not sure if you've played Skyrim anytime recently, but combat is real basic in that game. While there is some spell variety to mix things up, and powers can help to give the player more options, for the most part you don't have a lot of interesting mechanics to work with in the middle of a fight. There are a trio of specific combat mechanics within Avowed which make it feel real satisfying. Stun, parry, and dodge. The stun meter might actually be my favourite part of Avowed combat. Even if you've not got the hang of any of the fancy abilities yet, you can still perform these crazy strong moves which have awesome animations tied to them. Unlike Skyrim finishers, these are something you can actually build your character around, and use as a proper mechanic, rather than just a little treat. Parrying is more of a niche system within Avowed, but it is also brilliant once you get the hang of it. With the skill unlocked, you get the opportunity to perform a perfectly timed block in order to counter your opponent. This is a great risk-reward mechanic, as if you wait too long you take the full brunt of the attack, so standard blocking would be safer, but wouldn't open up the chance to counter-attack. Risk-reward mechanics are almost always a smart call in games, as they add a bit of player skill into things, and give the opportunity for us to become better at the game, rather than just being able to master it right away. Final of these mechanics is dodging. Being able to quickly move out of the way of incoming attacks helps make combat feel more dynamic. Rather than the Elder Scrolls melee where you can only back away awkwardly and hope to be out of range, using more of the Soul-style dodge, which, yeah, dodging is better than rolling, just going to say that here, but using that to entirely avoid an attack not only lets the devs give enemies stronger moves to work with, but also makes it so the player has a better movement system. I love advanced movement within games, and while Titanfall 2 will always be the MVP in that regard for me, I am glad to see more games push towards advanced mobility where they can. Considering Starfield had sliding and mantling included, I can imagine Bethesda pushing a little further with this mindset, and dodging is the next logical step in that direction. Next up are uniques, and if you've been around the channel for a while, then you already are familiar with my feelings on this subject. I love uniques, and hate the legendary system. Bethesda seems to love random effects on random weapons and armour in order to make every enemy and chest essentially just a loot box, which has the potential to give the best or worst item in the game. There's no reason behind you getting that item, it's just random chance. This is how the legendary system works. It's basically just gambling, and it removes control away from the player. Uniques, on the other hand, are something that Obsidian love, and with good reason. Every unique item is specifically placed in one place in the game world, with a certain way to get it, and often lore for the item which makes it make sense to be placed in that place in the world. It gives them real purpose, allows for players to go after specific items that fit in with their build, and stops control of the balance of a game falling entirely to the machine. We live in a period where so many companies are trying to replace intelligent human minds with stupid machine ones, just in order to try and save paying wages. The Uniques versus Legendary issue is one that perfectly highlights this. You can either leave it to the machine to give you items, and it will be utterly random with no reason or soul to it, or you can let actual talented people work on designing Uniques which give a true reward to the player for their actions, and allow for more personality to shine through. The Elder Scrolls franchise does have some great unique items that occur throughout multiple of the games. The Daedric artifacts are a prime example of this, and show that the franchise is a good setting for unique items. But Bethesda as a company has been leaning further and further away from these, with Starfield being the key example of a legendary system taken too far. Obsidian, on the other hand, have gone in the opposite direction, doubling down on uniques and littering the game with them, ensuring every weapon and armour type has multiple choices for the player to acquire. Alright, Angry Sergeant out of the way, onto a less fiery point, dialogue checks. I think that most RPG players get a kick out of seeing skill checks tucked away within conversation. If you're playing as a muscle-bound behemoth, then it feels right that you should be able to throw your weight around while talking to NPCs. To be fair to the Elder Scrolls franchise, it's not like skill checks of some kind are a complete unheard of within the games. I just want them to be a bit more prevalent in the future. With Skyrim, they were pretty much just limited to the speech skill, and had the player persuade, bribe, or intimidate. Avowed, on the other hand, makes it so that every single attribute has checks tied to it, as well as the background that you choose. I'd love it if the Elder Scrolls 6 went with this mentality, and made it so that every skill has dialogue checks tied to it. If you've been leveling up Sneak, then maybe you can be extra subtle in a conversation. If you're a Restoration Mage, then you could offer up healing magic to get someone on your side. The more checks, the better as far as I'm concerned. Less of a universally appreciated one this time, boss fights. Avowed has proper boss fights in it, with unique enemies who get the big health bar at the top of the screen, and often come with certain resistances and special moves. The Elder Scrolls, on the other hand, just kinda treats every enemy the same. You could argue that the franchise technically has boss fights. When you face down iconic characters like Mercer Frey, Dagolthur, or Jagar Tharn, it should be a proper boss battle, but there's not typically anything extra added to the encounter that sets them apart from standard combat within the respective games. I think Avowed is a great example of how you can put a whole bunch of boss fights into the game without making it be all about the boss battles, like a FromSoft RPG is. I do understand that not everyone loves boss battles, so I think it's fine if you disagree with me on this point, but I personally would still love to see the Elder Scrolls games put a bit more fanfare and effort into what should be the climactic fights at the end of a questline. My penultimate thing I think Bethesda should steal from Avowed is the party camp. This is another fairly minor one, but I think the party camp is the main thing in Avowed which helps to make it feel like you're on a real journey. By setting up camp and allowing you to do your crafting and character conversations here, it helps to make you feel more like an adventuring party. It's a bit of well-needed immersion, and one that works in so many different games. I already talked about how I want followers to be more fully fleshed out characters in the next Elder Scrolls game, and the party camp can help to make that be so. By giving the player a specific area where you don't have to worry about being attacked and can take things slower, you open up the opportunity to just talk to your followers for a while. The modern Elder Scrolls games already have an advanced time mechanic, which matters considering you have day/night cycles and NPC routines to work around, but this is typically done just by your character standing still for hours on end. Instead, let the player character set up a camp, get settled down, and rest for those hours instead. This would also be a great addition for survival modes, which I am hoping will get an official inclusion in the next Elder Scrolls game. We did get a creation for it with Skyrim Anniversary Edition, so it's kind of been included already, and setting up camp would tie into this perfectly. When you're in the snowy northern realms and need to heat up, you can gather around the campfire. When fatigue sets in and you need to rest, you can lay out a bedroll. It just makes sense for adventurers in a fantasy setting to be able to set up camp while out in the wilds, and there's so many in-game benefits that could come about from this mechanic. The final thing I think the Elder Scrolls should take from Avowed is the limited power and status the Imperial Envoy is given. In most Elder Scrolls games, you start out as just a random low-level prisoner, with nothing going on for them, but often end up as the leader of a bunch of different powerful factions. In Skyrim, you can go from prisoner of the Imperial Legion, to master of the Thieves Guild, head of the Dark Brotherhood, and archmage of the College of Winterhold. You go from an absolute nobody to the most important person in all of these factions. Kind of. You are technically in charge of all these factions, but you still end up being treated like some kind of scrub. The other members still treat you kind of like a new recruit, you're given quests by the same quest givers in the exact same way, and beyond the quest rewards, there doesn't tend to be any special perks for leading a faction. Avowed, on the other hand, starts the player out with a limited amount of social power and influence, and ties this heavily into how the various NPCs you interact with will treat you. Early on, you're in Empire-controlled lands, so you get treated with some level of reverence and respect, but as you push deeper into the Living Lands, your standing within the Empire matters less and less, as the communities you come across are either indifferent or outright aggressive towards the Adheran Empire. It all makes sense and gives you a good balance of power. Rather than making you either a complete nobody or the master of all, you are put at a mid-level of prestige, which is much easier to work around. In future Elder Scrolls games, I don't want to be a faction leader if it's not going to mean anything. I'd much rather we get the opportunity to work our way up to a mid-ranking position within a faction and have it actually be reflected by the characters you interact with. Those were the elements from Avowed that I want to see in the next Elder Scrolls game. Let me know in the comments below what elements you would like to see, and make sure to leave a like if you agreed with any of my points. Subscribe for more videos like these, and as always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.